Good morning. Today we're going to be taking a look at percents and percent of a number. And we've done work with percents before. Percent of a number is going to be a little strange at first, but then you're going to look at that and go, oh, I know what we're doing with this. So I don't think you're going to have any trouble with it. First, we're going to start with a couple of more items from the Smarter Balance Test Release questions. So for this first one, we have Miss Stone buys groceries for a total of $45.32. She now has $32.25 left. Which equation could be used to find out how much money Miss Stone had before she bought the groceries? And you have your choices here that you would select from. Well, you need to think about what it is that you're looking at. And if it was a total, that's going to be the full amount. So if I'm thinking of an equation and I need to write something and I know that my total is going to be $45.32, I can go ahead and place this here. Oops, 32. And she has $32.25 left. So she still has that with her. That means she spent a portion of that money. And what you need to do is think of which one of these equations would work to help you figure out how much money she spent and how much money she still has to equal her total amount. So discuss this with your partner. Pause the video here. Take about 1 minute to talk about this and then come back in and we're going to see which ones would make sense. Okay? Pause the video and go ahead and talk. Okay, so we're back. And we know that, again, $45.32 is going to be at one end of the equal sign. So I see a $45.32 on this side, and here's the equal sign here. But I also see that this is multiplied by something. And this tells me this was a total. So I know I can't multiply that by any number because that wouldn't make sense. I'm looking at this one, and this has X subtract $45.32 equals $32.25. And then I've got another where I'm adding something to 45, and then I'm adding something to 32. So you've discussed it with your partners, and I'm going to have the substitute randomly call in a few people now. We know that this one we can take out. We're not multiplying anything by that, but we know we're going to have to be subtracting something. So which one of these would make sense? Or if you're not subtracting, then you're thinking about what amount plus another amount would equal the 45.32. So go ahead, couple of volunteers, and share your answers. Okay, and I'm going to stop you there. And I am willing to bet this is the one that you selected. Because if she has $32.25 left, and this is the total amount, then it's something plus $32.25 would equal this. And you did not let that subtraction sign fool you. Okay, good job. So now let's go to this one here. And we have 2/3 times another fraction is going to equal n. Sarah claims that for any fraction multiplied by 2/3, n will be less than 2/3. To convince Sarah that this statement is only sometimes true, drag one number into each box so the product n is less than 2/3. And then drag one number into each box so that the product n is not less than 2/3. Well, since this is a screenshot, you're not going to be dragging anything. But what you can do is in your math notebook, you can try out different fractions. What could you multiply? What fraction could you multiply 2/3 by where your answer is less than 2/3? What fraction could you multiply 2/3 by where your answer is greater? Because again, you're trying to convince Sarah that this statement that any fraction multiplied by 2/3 will be less than 2/3. So take about 3 minutes, pause the video here. You're going to take about 3 minutes, come back in, and then we'll take a look and see what would make sense here. So go ahead and pause, and you're going to come back in at the end of 3 minutes. Okay, so let's think about what this is asking here. But before I go any further, I want the substitute to call on a couple of different people. Even if you're not sure what the answer is, give it your best guess and say what you think, what you discussed with your partner, and what you think would be some numbers or some fractions that we could put in here. Okay, so take about 1 minute, share your ideas, even if those ideas are, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but maybe, and then go from there. Okay, so hopefully we got some ideas. And I'm going to use a guess and check method. Make this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to put 2/3, and then I'm going to multiply this by, and I'm just going to pick a fraction. I'm going to say 1/2. Okay, maybe some of you pick that fraction too. And I've got 2 times 1 is 2. 3 times 2 is 6. And Sarah's statement is that any fraction that you multiply 2/3 by is going to be less than 2/3. Well, 2/6 is not lowest terms. 2/6 can be reduced to 1/3. And, well, she's correct with this one. 1/2 times 2/3 gives me 1/3. So I'm going to try 2/3 times, let's see, we'll do 3/4. And 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, well, 6/12 not lowest terms. That's going to reduce to 1/2. And sure enough, again, 2/3 is greater than 1/2. So, I'm going to think about something here. And I'm going to think if I use 2/3 and I want this to be greater than 2/3 after I multiply. I know that I can use the multiplicative inverse, and 1/2, and the multiplicative inverse is 2/1. Well, if it's 2/1, that's a fraction. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3. Well, I multiplied and my answer is bigger than 2/3. So let me see what happens if I do 2/3 times 4/3. 2/3 times 4/3. 4 times 2 is 8. 3 times 3 is 9. Well, let's compare 8/9. And some of you probably are already going, I know. And 2/3. I want to be able to really compare them, so I want to make equivalent fractions. So I'm looking at 9 and 3, and I know my common denominator is going to be 9. So I'm going to put a 9 here. And 3 times 3 is 9. So I'm going to have 2 times 3 is 6. 6/9 is not lowest terms. 6/9 is going to give me 2. Okay, so I have 2/3, which is not less than 2/3. It's equal to 2/3. So I've got two examples here where I could multiply by a fraction, but look what I noticed about my fraction. It's an improper fraction. And I proved that you could have multiplied by a fraction where your answer is not less than 2/3. Again, on the Smarter Balance test, you would drag your numbers in here and you would put a 1 here if you were going to use 1/2, and then here you would put a 2 and a 1, whatever one you tried. But work it out first, try it both ways, and see if you can actually prove it. Don't just guess and say, yeah, I think that's going to be good. Actually work it out. Okay, nice. So now I'm going to come over to, this is a review of percent as a number. And I'm sure you remember doing this before. We did a number of different assignments where you actually created this chart and you converted from a fraction to a decimal to a percent. Remember, to convert a fraction to a decimal, you divide. And you're going to divide 4 into 1 decimal point. You know, I bet you why they call that a decimal. And 4 does not go into 1. 4 goes into 10 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8. When I subtract, I'm going to have a remainder of 2. I'm going to bring down the 0, and 4 goes into 20 5 times. Now, I want to change that decimal to a percent. So you're going to move your decimal point 2 places to the right. So 0 decimal point 25 becomes, moving this 2 places, 25%. Okay? Now, I'm going to have you pause the video here. I want you to create this chart in your math notebook, and I want you to change the fraction to a decimal to a percent. Remember, you're going to divide. Your denominator becomes your divisor. Your numerator becomes your dividend. Decimal point, which is why they call it a decimal. Add 2 zeros. You can add more if you need it. And go ahead and create the rest of your chart. Okay? Pause here and come back in about 5 minutes, and we're going to check and see how you did. Okay? Pause here, do your work, work together, discuss about what you're finding compared to the top row if you need to look at a model, and we'll be back in 5. Okay, so let's see how you did. 7/10, well, we said you're going to divide. So you're going to have 10 into 7, decimal point 0, 0. Decimal point goes in the quotient. And you have 0.7. If you continued all the way out, you may have put the 0 here, or you may have thought, you know what, it's not needed, I'm not putting it there. That's fine. That it's not going to be a problem, because when you move this to write your percent, you're going to move your decimal point, not your you move your decimal point, and then you'll have your percent. So get ready. And you're going to end up with 70%. I just realized I did not do this one here. So what will you have for this? Well, 100, it's not going to go into 29. It's going to go into 290, 29 times. So you have 0 decimal point 29 or 29 hundredths as a decimal. Isn't that what you had here as a fraction? 29 hundredths, 29 hundredths as a decimal. Exactly. You're going to move your decimal point 2 places, and you're going to have 29%. Okay? I know you guys are just doing a great job with this. So let's go to the next one. Well, I don't have a fraction here. How am I supposed to do this? They just gave me a decimal. How am I supposed to write that as a fraction? Remember, there's a relationship between decimals and fractions. And I kind of just hinted to it. So I'm going to count the place value. This is tenths, hundredths. When I say the last place value position, that becomes your denominator, tenths, hundredths. So my denominator is going to be 100. Well, what's my numerator? That would be the 75. So there is my fraction. There is my decimal. I'm going to move this 2 points, and there is my percent. Nice. Well, let's look at this one. I have 0 decimal point 03. Don't have a fraction, and I don't have a percent. Remember, you're going to count the place value positions. You're going to start after the decimal point. Tenths, hundredths. That hundredths becomes your denominator. Well, what's your numerator? I've got a 0. I don't need that, but I sure need the 3. 3 hundredths. 3 hundredths. Cool. Move your decimal point 2 places, and this is 3%. Okay. Now we're taking a look at, again, there's no fraction, but now you know you're going to count tenths, hundredths. The number that you have as the decimal becomes your numerator. There's 48 hundredths. Move your decimal point 2 places, and you've got 48%. Cool. Okay. Now we're going to move on to our next. Whoops, I just went backwards. We're going to move on to our next page. And we can find the percent of a number. In your own words, explain what each of the following means. 100% of something, 50% of something, or 0% of something. So take about 1 minute, have a conversation, actually 2 minutes, because I want you to write out your statement. Take 2 minutes, 1 minute to discuss, 1 minute to write out your statement. What does 100% of something mean? If you want to relate it to grades, you can do that. If you want to relate it to getting something, you can do that too. So however you want to explain it, what does it mean to get 100% of something? What does it mean to get 50% of something? And what does it mean to get 0% of something? Stop the timer for 2 minutes, and you're going to discuss, and then we're going to move on. Okay, ready? Pause for 2. Okay, and here we go. Complete each sentence. I want you to write this in your math notebook. And yes, you do need to write each sentence. You can't just write the word. So you're going to write out $1 is, and what are you going to put there for the cents? And if we're talking about $1 and we're talking about cents, I don't mean dimes. Then you're going to complete each of the following, saying what the percent is of $1. Okay? So you've got 11 sentences or 11 statements, and you need to write them down and then fill in with what the value would be. So pause here and set the timer for 15 minutes. That should give you more than enough time to write this down and put your answers in. If most of the class is finished before 15 minutes, then the substitute is going to start the video again and we'll just pick up from there. Okay, so go. Okay, so let's check and see. Well, a dollar is 100 cents. 100% of a dollar is 100 cents. Okay, if you have 100 pennies, you've got a dollar. 25% of a dollar is, well, you could say a quarter, that's true, but it's also 25 cents. Okay, 0% of a dollar. If you don't have any money at all, you've got 0 cents. Okay, 20% of a dollar is, well, yeah, 20 cents. 34% of a dollar, I'm willing to bet you all said 34 cents. 50% of a dollar, yep, that would be 50 cents. 75% of a dollar, that would be 75 cents. 10% of a dollar, you have 10 cents. 5% of a dollar, you have 5 cents. 76% of a dollar, 76 cents. Okay, and I'm willing to bet you finished in plenty of time, that you did not need the whole amount of time that you were given. That's because you guys are the old smart ones. So here we go. I'm going to clear the annotations and moving on. So now a meter, here's a science tie-in. A meter stick is how many centimeters? Well, think of the prefix centi. What does centi refer to? Think of a unit of time that has cent or centi in it. Well, maybe not centi, but it has cent. And think of a dollar, 100 cents. Whoops, I just gave you the answer there. Never mind. I'm going to fill it in. Meter is 100 centimeters. Kind of blew that one. Okay, now you're going to represent on a meter stick. I want you to draw this meter stick in your math notebook and make it the full length of the page from side to side, not from top to bottom. Because after you draw that, you're going to place these percents on your meter stick. Okay? So draw your meter stick. 0 at one end, 100% or 100 at the other, and then you're going to put your percents in there. Okay, so pause the video here. You need to draw your meter stick, and you need to draw it the length or the width of, I think I said length, I meant width. Draw it the width from side to side of the paper, and then you're going to start filling in where these different percents would go. Okay, and then you're going to answer 15 as well. So pause the video here, and I'm going to have you pause the video for about 8 minutes so you can talk about where you think these would go, because some of them might be a little challenging and where are you going to put it. And remember when we talked about benchmark fractions, and we said, or even with percents, 50% is halfway. You might want to use that as a benchmark. And then you've got another benchmark here with 25%, and you've got another benchmark here with 75%. So you might want to use those, this is at your very end, to help you place the rest of these in. Okay? So pause 8 minutes, and then we'll wrap this up at the end. Okay? Okay, your time has ended. I'm sure you have everything placed on your meter stick. So let's talk about Question 15. How are finding cents in a dollar and finding centimeters on a meter stick related? Well, if you said they're both based on 100, you're absolutely correct. Okay? You go to 100%, and with a centimeter, there's 100 centimeters in a meter. Okay? Good job. Now, finding percents with double number lines. I want you to create this chart in your math notebook, including this double number line. And then we're going to take a look and see how we're going to fill the rest of this in. Okay? So pause the video here. Take about 3 minutes to create this chart and create your double number line. Again, don't make a little teeny tiny line. Your double number line here should be the length of the paper from top to bottom, so you can fit everything in, and then you can create this. If you don't want to draw the boxes, then make 2 columns, words and equivalent fractions. Okay? So pause here. Take about 3 minutes to create this, and we're going to come back and think about how we're going to set this up. Okay, well, I'm looking at the percents here. This starts at 0, this goes to 100. What makes sense to me is this is going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then you've got 100%. So here's my percents. So when I'm looking here, 50% is here. And then I'm going to fill in what this would be here. And if I look at 50%, I'm going to know what that would be. So now I'm going to be looking at, if this is 80 and this is 0, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, if I have 80 here and I want to end with 80, would it make sense that each of these would be 10? And I'm thinking no, because if I counted up to 10, then this is not going to be 10. But if this ends up at 80 and this is where I'm going to start, it would make sense that each interval is 8. So 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, 72. So I have my numbers in increments of 8. I have my percents in increments of 10. 50% of 80, well, this is 50% of 80 is 40. Sure enough, when I look at my double number line, 50% of 80, this is the full amount, is 40. So 50 100ths equals 40 80ths. Okay? So now I'm going to take a look at 40% of 80 is how much? Well, if I'm looking at 40%, this is my 40%, 80 is the full amount. If I go straight across, 40% of 80 is 32. And 40 100ths is 32 80ths. So 40% of 80 is 32. This is 40%. This is the full amount, 100%. This is the full amount, 80, and this is what 40% of 80 is. Well, now I'm looking at this, and I've got 60 100ths. Well, here's my 60%. And we said this was 60 out of 100%, 60% out of 100%. Well, if I want to know what number is going to go here, I'm just going to go straight across. And that is going to be 48. So I can write 60% of 80 is 48. So this is how you can use a double number line to help you find a percent of a number. So what would 75% be? Well, I don't have a 75% here. I've got a 70, I've got an 80. What would 75% be? Well, if this is 70 and this is 80, this is 56 and this is 64, what would I have there? What do you think that would be? If you're saying that I'm going to have to take a look at, if this is 70, 75 is going to be here, halfway between 70 and 80. Well, I'm going to need something that's going to be halfway between 56 and 64. And that something is 60. So 75% of 80 is 60. And that's going to be 60 80ths. Okay, so now let's take a look at our last one. And I have 25% of 100% is what of 80%, or what is 20% or 25% of 80? Well, again, I'm going to look at, here's 20 and 30. 25 is going to be halfway. So I'm going to need something that's halfway between 16 and 24. And that is 20. So 25% of 80 is 20. 25% of 80 is 20. Nice. Okay. So this is probably all we're going to have time for today. On Monday, we'll do more work with percents and finding percent of a number using double number lines. And I will also be going over with you what I refer to as the is of process. Okay, and when you read this and you read, I'll show you a quick one here, 75%, you fill this in because you know this much, 75% of 80 is, that's what you're looking for, okay? And then you cross multiply. You would have 100x equals 75 times 80 is going to be 6. Lost my pen. Is going to be 6,000. Then you're going to divide by 100, divide by 100, and my answer is going to be x is 60. And that's what we found here. So we're going to do more of this on Monday. So you'll have another strategy besides making a double number line. to find a percent of a number. And one more way that we'll take a look at is multiplying by the decimal. Okay? So, have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday. If by chance the bell has not rung yet, take out your book and read silently. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday.